Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Kripa. So I've been a part of Valley of Words Arts and Literature Festival since its inception. And each year, I eagerly look forward to that call, that email that tells me which author, which book has been assigned to me. And I must share, once I got my hands on Art is a Voice, my heart sang with joy. I read the book in a frenzied rush the first time round, only to return to it to savor, devour, dwell on all of the abundance that the book has to offer. So here's a book that's definitely not going to sit forgotten on a shelf. It's good to see young faces, friends here for a very burning and relevant issue of the time. Collective action of citizens. If we learn to see differently, art can be a potent tool for protest. Before I draw Kripa into the discussion, I'd quickly like to share my take on the book. So here's a book that's skewed into the times, and as I see it, Art is a Voice is a rebirthing of the book as we've known it. It's a slim book with a fierce call to arms without being preachy. Kripa very mindfully entwines her intricate illustrations with 11 verses of contemporary Indian artists, along with their artworks. And at the core of the book are potent key words: dissent, protest, gender, displacement, disparity, resistance, all of which stir passions, deep pain, anger, frustration. And Kripa very gracefully steers the narrative at this point towards a succinct pledge. A pledge that compels the reader to think deeply, with kindness and with clarity, to seek solutions through the self and the community to become that force which is so very essential right now for the transitioning of the world into a more balanced, more harmonious, inclusive, and joyful space to be in. I would now like to request Kripa to please read her poem, which I see as the very foundation of the book.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the really humbling introduction, Ira. It's a pleasure and honor to be here at the Valley of Words. Thank you, Sanjeev ji, and thank you for this huge honor. And also, it is a pleasure of mine to learn about the work that you are doing, the environmental activism that you are involved in, especially at a time like today, where the multiple issues that the city of Dehradun is facing, and we are facing, as a country together and globally as well. So here's the poem. The title is Art is a Voice. I wrote this poem in 2019 when we were at the crux of the farmers' protest that was taking place in the country, and there were also unlawful, unconstitutional arrests of human rights activists. There was also the CAA and NRC bills that were unlawfully passed against certain communities of marginalized communities of people. And at the crux of that is when I wrote this poem. They tell me, paint flowers, I paint what I see, protests blooming. They tell me, paint portraits of happy people, I paint what I see, people discontented. They tell me, paint houses, I paint what I see, people without homes. They tell me, paint villages, I paint what I see, villages fast changing. They tell me, paint cityscapes, I paint what I see, cities divided. They tell me, paint forests, I paint what I see, forests destroyed. They tell me, paint seascapes. I paint what I see, the sea reclaimed. They tell me, paint God. Who's God? I ask. They tell me, make it colorful. One color is all you like, I say. They tell me, paint inside the lines. I can't be contained, I say. They have power and use force. Still, I resist. They try to silence me, but I am resolute. Art is my voice. That's the book.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, Kripa. Thank you for sharing that. And I see that you sow the right seeds with those words. And if I could, in your words, perhaps, I see a forest blooming. Thank you. So to begin our discussion, I'd like to start at the very beginning. How did you go about choosing these 11 verses? Each verse is coupled with an artwork. So if you could walk us through your favorite pairing and how the visual element enhances the emotional or the political punch of the words.
So Ira, I wrote these verses when I was very angry. As I mentioned, that in 2019, all these issues, we were encompassed by all these issues in the country. And in my immediate area, in my city, we have a beautiful forest called the RA forest. I come from Bombay, and we have a forest called the RA forest. And the RA forest corridor is currently under threat by the local government because they want to put up the metro line is coming through the forest, and there's a shed that's coming up. And so we, meaning the citizens of the city, were involved actively in the protest, just like how you are involved in several tree protection protests. And also this was the time when Bilkis Banu protests were going on, and several other protests that were happening at the same time. And so I think it came from a space of anger, especially when my art was met I'm an artist, I'm a visual artist, and I keep putting up my artworks up sometimes on social media also. And when a journalist happened to see this art, and there was a banter on social media, and she ultimately tells me that, you are an artist, go paint pretty pictures, go paint flowers, leave the political work to us journalists. And that is when it began. I wrote the lines for the book. They tell me, paint flowers, I paint what I see, protests blooming, calling and urging people to question what is an artist, who is an artist. Can artists exist without provenance? Can artists exist without context?
Yeah. So in that context, taking that forward, there's a hierarchy between the artists, artisans, and craftspeople. Popular community and street-based art, such as murals, graffiti, tattooing, digital art, crafts markets, they're often dismissed as less serious, despite their cultural power. If you could define art for a young audience here, given that art is largely seen in the light as inaccessible, snobbish, arty-farty. So if you could elaborate on art as you see it and what you think is the real meaning of it as you see it.
I think when a child comes into the classroom at the age of 5 or 4, when they begin their school, a child is far more visually literate than an adult, who claims himself to be far more knowledgeable or literate after passing out from college and so on. So visual literacy is something which is not focused and which is not perhaps brought out in through our education, but I think it's subversive. We as a culture are constantly permeated with images today, especially our phones. We are scrolling through our phones. All of this is building on our visual intelligence, and whether it is the craft that you mentioned, or it is an aesthetic piece of a beautiful a drawing or a painting that we look at, all of this is creating a subconscious collective understanding of the world that we are living in today. And thus I think more than the spoken word, because art is a universal language which is understood by I think everyone, even by the children who we met today in the earlier session, who taught us sign language. We have much to learn from children about visual intelligence and visual literacy. And so the book is for children, talking to them and talking about them.
We'd started off and I'd requested you if you could share a favorite pairing, because there's art and there are your words together. If you could read something for audience, give them a taste of what is it that they can find or look for in the book.
Sure.
Also, if you could speak of the artist, their verse, and how at the end of the book you speak about each of them, their work, introducing the youngsters to the brilliant work they've done.
I don't think there is anything, I don't tend to, for me the book is about artists who are working as, working in collectives, and the idea of a book like this is to bring about, showcase the works of artists who we shouldn't idealize. That's not the purpose of the book, that we idolize and we celebrate one artist, but rather people's movements. These artworks that they create, they are about being in solidarity with people's movements at various times. And so I think one of the artists who I would like to talk to you about is Prabhakar Pachpute. Thank you. Prabhakar Pachpute, he belongs to Chandrapur district, and he belongs to a district where there is a lot of illegal mining that is taking place, which is, of course, reality almost all across India. And this is the couplet that is paired along with his work. They tell me paint villages, I paint what I see, the villages fast changing. And so this discussion that came about in schools, when I speak to children about what is a village and what is a city, what defines a city and what defines a village, not just the textbook definition of, houses per square kilometer or, better facilities or amenities, but also in terms of what is fast disappearing in villages and what is there in cities. One of the things that is often brought about is what you and I were also informally talking about today, connection with soil. Wherever I walk today in Bombay, it's just concrete, and the ground under me is very little soil that is left. And so it's important when we look at works like Prabhakar Pachpute's, where this is what he has to say. I'm concerned about the changes in the landscape and the people due to mining excavations and farmland acquisitions by coal mining companies in Chandrapur, Maharashtra. Having belonged to generations of a coal mining and farming family from the same area, I began using Maharashtra as my starting point with a combination of artistic research into different kinds of mining from around the world and moving from the personal to the global investigation, a complexity of historical transformation on an economic, societal, and environmental level. And so it talks about resource depletion, which is one of the biggest threats today we face globally also. And thus it further articulates, the book further goes on to articulate Prabhakar's words by saying that the ground underneath my feet is concrete everywhere I go, and as far as my eyes can see, how can I bring myself closer to the soil? And as Ira mentioned earlier, the book is also comes with a pledge, a space for readers to fill in, thereby also saying that we often as citizens of say a city or a country are passive receptors, but not active participants. And so it urges you to be an active participant and pick up what is immediate to you, the cause that is immediate to you, and write about it and voice it out.
Yeah, further to that question, what comes to my mind, since we are talking of environment and depletion, displacement, do you think that ecological loss is linked to human discontentment?
Certainly. I think it is intersectional, it is connected so closely. We know that no issue can be, all these 11 issues that are listed can be elaborated on separately as well, but the reason why they are threaded together in the book, because it's important to bring out the intersectionality of these issues, that whose forest lands are taken away, which are the villages that are fast changing, which are the cities that are fast changing, which are the communities that are being erased. Not yours and mine, Ira, but there are communities who belong to, they belong to a certain linguistic belt, they belong to a certain religious identity, and so they have been systematically, there are communities that are being systematically erased, and it's a conscious, political, happening. And thus, I think all of it is interlinked, because they are the ones who are bearing the first to bear the brunt of whether it is an ecological crisis or if it's a war or any other man-made crisis.
That's true. And the further we move away from environment and we are in these artificial spaces, it's a kind of hardening of the soul as well. Because we were birthed from nature and we are moving away from our true self. Through the book, there are plenty of issues that you touch upon which are interconnected. And you do draw the attention of the reader to interconnected injustices. Well, I'd read a while ago, and I definitely believe that dissent is the highest form of patriotism. But in the present time, when dissent is silenced and people who dare to are questioned, challenged, and labeled as anti-national and urban Naxals, how do you continue to work without self-sabotage? I'm very curious to hear that, because many a times when we have protests or we speak out or you write a post which might come across as anti-national or dissent, there's a rare person who'll respond to it. There's this fear. So how do you continue to work?
I think I also belong to fairly a privileged background where I belong to a city where I live in a safer environment, and that enables me to write and maybe make art which which is not attacked so much as, say, if I were to belong to, say, another community, or if I were belonging to a different zone in the country. But having said that, where my ideas come from is I work with a few marginalized group of people in my city. I work with this organization called Habitat and Livelihood Welfare Association, which looks into the livelihood and housing rights of migrant laborers. Then I also work with a foundation called the Red Boys Foundation, which is looking into education rights of and reading, promoting reading among children who come from ghettoized places, and most of them are Muslim children. And and it's this disparity so stark that this NGO which is set up, the center which is set up, it's at the edge of a very, very prominent high-class locality in Bombay, which is called BKC, Bandra Kurla Complex. I'm sure a lot of you know about this. And just on the other side, and the Mithi river flows, a river flows, which has become almost like a nala now, a sewage, and it flows right between these two areas. So one area which is so, you have these plush, high-tech buildings, and on the other side is Bharat Nagar, where the NGO is set up, which is essentially the quarry cutters or the stone cutters of people who built BKC. And these are the children of these quarry cutters, and they're first-generation education receivers. And so when you see and hear them and their stories, I think that that pushes me and compels me to remain angry about all that is, all that we all deserve but are not, we don't have access to, especially these children.
So moving away from the flow, there is something else, since we have a lot of children and we are discussing art as well. There's this whole buzz about AI. And Miyazaki's Ghibli art was replicated by AI, and it went viral with everybody's DP, Facebook pictures being replicated by the same. And Miyazaki responded by saying, "I strongly feel that it is an insult to life itself." As both an illustrator and an author, what do you feel about the growing role of AI? Do you see it as a tool of empowerment, or do you see it as a threat to original creative experiences and livelihoods?
The art that I create also is about social justice. And so I'm going to be very one-sided over here with this answer that, I'm a visual artist who creates with hands, and my work is all handmade, hand-done. I paint and I make collages. So I make these collages in my home, in my studio, in my home. And I use paper, I use actual tactile material. And so I'm going to be very one-sided over here, not just because I have learned the art traditionally, and I create art with the old school method, but also I think it stems from the fact that if you believe in social justice, you cannot be on the side of AI. And I would like to ask you also this question, because you are also an environmental activist and also, a connoisseur of art and books. What do you think, Ira?
The soul that a person has, our experiences, the way they make us who we are, I don't think that AI can replicate that soul. And how else will humans be relevant, if without that soul? And that soul is something that AI will never have. And there's a beauty of a villager, how he creates his experiences. And it's not possible that somebody sitting in a remote village, his experience can be replicated, or even whether it'll reach the AI, whoever is, uploading or feeding them with the data. So those first-hand experiences that one has, the human has, I don't think they can be replicated or should be replicated. Yeah, that would be my take on it, for sure. So there's, you've also spoken.
I also want to add to that you're right. I also feel that AI can be a content creator, and art is about creating a culture and feeding into a visual culture and building that visual culture. And I don't think AI can really do that.
Absolutely, and also I was just thinking, we saw this beautiful performance here a while ago. It was a Guru Shishya Parampara which has come, and but people have learned from it over the generations. So yeah, AI might reproduce when it's fed with certain data, but there are some things which we have to experience and bring forth. They cannot be dancing for us as gracefully or feeling the way the previous performers were. Yeah, are we running out of time? All right. So you were also, I was reading about you, Kripa. You also strongly feel about how the cities have changed. You particularly write about Mumbai, how you're moving around in air-conditioned cars, and how one connected earlier with everything around you, people you observed, and how we have cocooned ourselves. And I can say the very same for Dehradun. It used to be a lush green city where we could walk through the city, and there wasn't as much concrete. We saw the birds, the bees, the trees, we admired all of that, and now suddenly it's everybody is running in a rush from one place to another. There are traffic jams. So would you like to expound some more on that, about the changing face of cities? And what is it that you rue, what is it that you miss, and what made you dwell on that aspect about the changing face of cities?
Sure. I also want to point out, about from the earlier discussion that we had, that which also feeds into the work that I do while reading about different artists who are constantly inspiring and building on, from whom I build, is one of this artists is Sliman Mansoor, who's a Palestinian artist who, in an attempt to reject all the art supplies that are coming from Israel, Sliman Mansoor and 4 other Palestinian artists, as a resistance to the Israeli forces, they started using natural materials that are immediately available to them and create art with it. And so he creates art with just mud and water, creates sculptural works with mud and water. And so I think this is also a time where we need to resist these forces like AI, which are thrown at us by bigger corporations. Yes, and about your question about the cities that are constantly isolating us and making, we live in pockets. I think it is a conscious attempt by why we have been segregated and put into these boxed environment, whether it is schools today or whether it is educational institutions or workplaces. we have been systematically segregated by class and caste and so on. And I think this is one of the reasons why we need to, when we have an eclectic visual culture in our city, which is not just about drawing images from Pinterest, but coming from, like you mentioned earlier, the street art also, which represents marginalized communities, portraits of people who have never, whose faces are never there on hoardings and billboards. When we see them, that builds on our visual culture, and that kind of brings communities together and societies together.
And we're moving away from it. How sad is that in our bubbles? Thank you so much, Kripa, for that very honest and thought-provoking conversation. Your words, your art remind us that protest can be gentle, resistance can be beautiful, and that creativity itself can be a form of courage. Art as a Voice challenges each reader to introspect and look again at our silences, re-examine our silences, our choices, and our capacities to care. I think we've run out of time, therefore, I'll open the floor to the audience. And if you have a question, a response, a reflection to share with Kripa, please feel free to raise your hand.
I hope. Thank you for this stimulating conversation, ma'am. I hope audience has a few questions to ask and opinions to share. You can raise your hand and we will bring the mic to you.
Thank you for your honesty and courage. I really enjoyed the session. I just want to share something from Meghalaya, that's where I come from. For thousands of years, we've had these sacred forests, which are preserved for fresh drinking water and to attract rain. And we call them sacred, so nobody ever touches them. So I think, and we worship them, that they're like temples to us. Because we believe that if we are religious, then how can we abuse God's greatest creation? That is nature, which is inextricably linked to our very own existence. And this has not been taught for generations now. And if cutting trees from the, in the Dehradun Delhi highway, if cutting trees means progress, I think it's the height of regression. It's a height of regression, and it's related to our very own extinction. So I really enjoyed your session. I empathize with all your views, and thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.